What we are going to look at now is a special pattern called a perfect square trinomial. Often when we are factoring, if we know our special patterns, it can help us factor binomials a lot quicker, and even certain trinomials a lot quicker. So the first one we're going to look at is called a perfect square trinomial. So what's nice about these special patterns is that once you learn to recognize them, like I said before, it can make your job factoring a little bit easier. So the first one we're going to look at is this x squared plus 6x plus 9. This is a perfect square trinomial. The reason we know it's a perfect square trinomial is because it can be factored into a binomial squared. So when I look at the resulting answer, it's the binomial x plus 3 times itself. So x plus 3 squared. Now, if we look at the original trinomial, we see it's x squared plus 6x plus 9. That means we need two numbers that multiply to 9 and add up to 6. So our numbers that we're going to choose are going to be 3 and 3. So we get the binomial as x plus 3 times x plus 3, but instead of writing it out twice, we have the binomial squared, x plus 3 quantity squared. So there's two possible patterns when we have what's called a perfect square trinomial. Okay, and we're going to look at these two cases. So you'll notice that one of them is a binomial sum, see the a plus b squared, and one of them is a binomial difference. You see the a minus b squared. So that's really the only difference. And we get the sign from the original trinomial. So notice how in the first trinomial, the middle term was plus, and in the second trinomial, the middle term was minus. So here's how we check to see if we have a perfect square trinomial. So what we look at is the first term and the last term, and we see if they're perfect squares. If they are, then we go to look at the middle term. We notice if we double the product and we get the middle term, then we know we have a perfect square trinomial. So let me show you what I mean down here with this example. We're going to do the check to see if we have a perfect square trinomial. So when I look at 4x squared plus 20x plus 25, so what I want to check for is I want to see first if the 4x squared and if the 25, I want to check to see if those are perfect squares. So when I have 4x squared, I'm going to ask myself, is there a term that I squared to get me 4x squared? Well, hopefully you recognize that the term 2x will result in 4x squared when you square it. And then also the 25, you want to say, okay, is that a perfect square? Well, yes, it's the number 5 being squared. So remember in the beginning of the semester when I gave you that blue multiplication chart with your perfect squares and perfect cubes and told you it would be a really good idea to memorize them? Now that's coming into play. So if you can recognize right away that 25 is a perfect square, then you're on your way to noticing these patterns. Okay, now I have to check my middle term. So my middle term is this plus 20x. So here's what I do to check the middle term. I take the 2x and the 5 that I've already figured out, and I double it. Okay, so when I say double it, I'm going to put a 2 and multiply it by 2. So then I have 2 times 2x times 5. Well, 2x times 5 is 10x. So I really have 2 times 10x, which is 20x. Now, if that matches my middle term, then I know I have a perfect square trinomial. So now I go up and look at the formula and I decide which one of these formulas am I going to use. Well, I'm going to use the a plus b squared because my middle term is a plus, because I have 4x squared plus 20x plus 25. So now, what's this a and b? We got to figure that out. Okay, well, the a is my 2x and the b is my 5. So that 2x and that 5 make up my final answer. So believe it or not, I'm ready to write my answer here. Okay, so my answer is just going to be 2x plus 5 quantity squared. Now, let's do a check just to make sure that we understand why that is our final answer. So remember I said don't be lazy, you want to write it out twice. So I want to check 2x plus 5 times 2x plus 5. So I'm going to do FOIL. So 2x times 2x gives me 4x squared. Now on the outside I get plus 10x. On the inside I get another plus 10x. And at the end I get plus 25. Now let's combine our like terms in the middle. What do we get? We get plus 20x from our original problem. So then I would get, let's write it out, I would get 4x squared plus 20x plus 25. And that checks out. So I know and I can be confident that my original answer over here, the 2x plus 5 quantity squared, is my final answer.